The tow truck's chains rattled violently as they dragged away Harold's beloved 50-year-old tractor at dawn. Harold Briggs stood frozen on his gravel driveway, coffee mug slipping from his trembling fingers. His tractor had simply been parked there for decades. Now it was being hauled off like criminal evidence under a blinding July morning sun. Bonnie Walsh watched from her porch with a satisfied, predatory smile. She held a clipboard tightly, eyes gleaming behind designer sunglasses that hid pure malice. Rules are rules, Mr. Voice dripping with false sweetness and superiority. Harold's hands shook as he stared at the empty space where his tractor once sat. That tractor had carried his late wife's ashes during their final ride across their land. It wasn't decoration, it was memory. Grief. Rural heritage combined. You never joined the HOA, Bonnie continued. Smug satisfaction radiating from her perfectly painted lips. Maybe now you'll understand why membership truly matters around here, she added with venom. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, afraid to speak against the woman who controlled everything. Bonnie had ruled this neighborhood for 9 years through fear, fines. She targeted newcomers, minorities, self-appointed authority and dominance. Harold had moved here seeking peace after losing his wife. Instead, because he refused to pay unnecessary, predatory HOA membership dues. This is harassment, Harold said quietly, his voice cracking with disbelief and quiet fury. Bonnie laughed. It's the quiet, sun-drenched suburban street outside. Call it whatever you want. But the tow company already has your tractor secured now. Mara Jennings stepped outside clutching her phone, recording everything with shaking hands. This isn't right. Anger rising as she captured the cruel spectacle unfolding. Bonnie spun around, her expression hardening instantly into practiced, threatening HOA board president authority. Careful, or your fence violation notice might mysteriously multiply overnight into something worse. Harold's grandson, 10-year-old Eli, father's old, weathered farming cap tightly. Grandpa? Eli asked, confusion and fear trembling through his voice. Harold knelt down, forcing a brave smile despite the storm raging violently inside his chest. Sometimes people with power forget what fairness actually means, he whispered gently. Painfully honest. The tow truck rumbled away, leaving behind tire marks and a suffocating cloud of dust. Harold watched until the truck disappeared completely around the corner, swallowing hard against rising tears. Bonnie strutted back inside her pristine, oversized house, savoring her latest cruel victory completely. She believed this would finally force Harold into submission, into paying her precious HOA dues. She had no idea this single action would ignite something far bigger than her imagination. Harold stood there long after everyone left, staring at the empty driveway in silence. Memories flooded back of teaching his late wife how to drive that same tractor. He remembered harvest mornings, laughter, Across 40 years of marriage together. Now it sat impounded somewhere. Treated like trash by a woman drunk on petty power. Mara approached cautiously, placing a comforting hand gently on Harold's tense, shaking shoulder. "We need to fight this," she said firmly, determination flickering behind her worried eyes. Harold exhaled slowly, anger transforming gradually into something colder, sharper. "She picked the wrong veteran to mess with," he murmured, jaw tightening with resolve. That night, table, surrounded by old military discharge papers. He pulled out forgotten property documents, deeds, association founding agreements carefully. Something inside those yellowed papers caught his attention, sparking a dangerous, calculated idea instantly. He smiled for the first time since watching his tractor disappear down that dusty road. Bonnie Walsh had just made the biggest mistake of her petty, power-hungry administrative career. Harold Briggs wasn't just a grieving widower anymore, he was a man with purpose. And that purpose would soon shake the entire HOA's foundation to its very core. The next morning, records office before sunrise even broke. He requested every document related to Maple Ridge Estate's original HOA formation and bylaws. The clerk, Anne, recognized desperation mixed with quiet determination in his eyes. "Looking for something specific?" she asked, sliding thick folders across the worn wooden counter carefully. "I'm looking for the truth," Harold replied, voice steady despite exhaustion weighing heavily on him. Hours passed as he scoured through faded paperwork, searching for any legal loophole available. Then he found it. Amendments from over 3 decades ago. The original HOA charter explicitly stated membership remained voluntary, never mandatory, for longtime original residents. Harold's property, Tory amendment vote, technically remained completely exempt legally. Bonnie had violated his property rights by towing a vehicle from non-HOA binding private land. His hands trembled. Not from fear anymore, but from electrifying, righteous anticipation building rapidly inside. He immediately called a lawyer. James Okafor, known locally for fighting predatory homeowner associations successfully. James listened carefully, then let out a low whistle of genuine shock and excitement. "Harold, this could be unlawful conversion and serious harassment combined." Meanwhile, residents, oblivious to the storm quietly gathering against her. She fined a disabled veteran for his wheelchair ramp violating supposed aesthetic neighborhood guidelines unfairly. She harassed an immigrant family for hanging laundry, calling it lowering everyone's precious property values. Mara organized secret meetings among frustrated neighbors, sharing stories of Bonnie's relentless cruel tyranny. Story after story emerged, painting Bonnie as a tyrant disguised behind fake community improvement rhetoric. "She's been doing this for years," whispered Elena Ruiz, tears welling as she spoke softly. Elena's family had been fined repeatedly for cultural decorations Bonnie deemed inappropriate for the neighborhood. Harold realized this wasn't just about his tractor anymore, this was about justice itself. He began collecting testimonies, documents, Bonnie's systematic discriminatory enforcement patterns. James helped him file a formal complaint with the state's Homeowner Association Oversight Board. They also filed a civil lawsuit demanding immediate return of Harold's illegally impounded vintage tractor. News of the lawsuit spread quickly through Maple Ridge estates like wildfire through dry grass. Residents who once stayed silent suddenly found courage, stepping forward with their own complaints. Bonnie called an emergency HOA board meeting to control damage. She stood before nervous board members, insisting Harold was simply a troublemaker disrupting neighborhood harmony. He's exaggerating, she insisted, though sweat beaded slightly along her tense, powdered forehead. But board treasurer Frank Delgado had grown increasingly uncomfortable with Bonnie's unchecked spending and decisions. He had quietly noticed irregularities in the HOA's budget reports over the past year. Legal fees, payments, and unexplained withdrawals had been steadily draining community reserves. Frank decided it was finally time to investigate Bonnie's financial management more thoroughly and honestly. He requested complete access to bank statements, invoices, months. What he discovered made his stomach twist with disbelief, anger, concern. Bonnie had been funneling HOA funds toward personal expenses disguised as administrative neighborhood costs. Designer furniture, expensive vacations, and lavish dinners were labeled as community improvement initiatives repeatedly. The tow truck company itself had received suspicious, inflated payments far exceeding standard towing rates. Frank realized Bonnie's cruel power trip might soon collapse under its own reckless financial weight. He reached out quietly to Harold, offering crucial information that could change everything completely. "I think she's been stealing from all of us," Frank admitted, voice low and shaken. Harold's lawyer immediately expanded their investigation, subpoenaing HOA financial records for forensic accounting review. Bonnie continued preparing to crush Harold publicly at the meeting. She printed flyers calling him disrespectful and unwilling to support community standards and values. She had no idea the very community she manipulated was preparing to turn against her. The upcoming HOA meeting would become the battlefield where truth finally confronted unchecked tyranny directly. Harold stood in his barn that evening, polishing his father's old farming tools quietly. "This is for you," he whispered, thinking of his wife and decades of stolen peace. Tomorrow, fear and manipulation would begin crumbling rapidly around her. Justice was finally gathering momentum like a storm before unstoppable. Righteous lightning strikes. The community center overflowed with residents the night of the emergency HOA board meeting. Bonnie sat confidently at the head table, clipboard ready, in place. She expected to dismiss Harold's complaints easily, just as she always silenced previous neighborhood dissent. Instead, his lawyer, Mara, and dozens of supportive neighbors. He carried a thick folder containing legal documents, photographs, collected carefully. "Bonnie Walsh," James began firmly, "we have proof of unlawful towing and financial misconduct combined." Gasps echoed throughout the room as residents leaned forward, stunned by the serious accusations. James presented evidence showing Harold's property remained legally exempt from mandatory HOA membership requirements entirely. The tow truck's invoice revealed Bonnie personally authorized an illegal seizure from non-member private property. Then Frank stood up, voice trembling slightly as he revealed the financial misconduct uncovered. She's been stealing from our community reserves for personal luxury expenses, Frank announced. Devastatingly clear. The room erupted into furious whispers. Anger rippling through stunned. Betrayed neighborhood faces everywhere. Bonnie's confident expression shattered instantly, replaced by panic creeping rapidly across her painted features. "This is ridiculous," she stammered, voice cracking under mounting pressure and undeniable damning evidence. But the documents spoke louder than her desperate, increasingly hollow protests and frantic justifications. Receipts showed thousands spent on designer handbags, luxury vacations, and exclusive private spa treatments. The towing company's owner, subpoenaed earlier, confirmed Bonnie demanded illegal seizures for personal vendetta purposes. "She told us specifically to target him because he refused her membership demands," he testified. The crowd's anger transformed into outrage. Years of suppressed frustration finally breaking free completely. Elena stood up. Fines targeting immigrant families' cultural traditions and decorations. The disabled veteran shared how Bonnie fined his medically necessary wheelchair ramp repeatedly without mercy. One by one, their voices combining into an unstoppable wave of justice. Bonnie tried defending herself, but every word only deepened the damning hole she dug. The HOA board voted unanimously to remove her immediately from her position of power. State oversight officials, already investigating due to Harold's formal complaint, arrived within the week. They froze the HOA's remaining accounts, launching a full forensic audit into Bonnie's management. Bonnie faced multiple charges including embezzlement, fraud, private property. The HOA's entire budget, drained by her years of theft, left almost nothing remaining. Legal settlements, refunds to wronged homeowners, and audit costs consumed whatever funds remained completely. Bonnie's lavish house, purchased partly through stolen community funds, was seized during legal proceedings. She lost her position, her reputation, multiple serious felony charges. The community she once ruled through fear now remembered her only with bitter disgust. Harold's tractor was returned, fully repaired, with a formal public apology from county officials. He drove it slowly down Maple Ridge's Main Street, neighbors cheering and applauding his victory. Mara organized a community celebration, transforming pain into healing through shared resilience and unity. Elena's family received compensation, finally able to display their cultural decorations without fear or judgment. The disabled veterans' ramp remained proudly intact, protected now under new fair community guidelines established. Frank helped rebuild the HOA's structure, ensuring transparency, fairness, future decision. Harold stood before his repaired tractor, sunlight gleaming warmly across its freshly polished metal surface. He placed his hand gently on the seat, remembering his wife's laughter from decades earlier. "We did it," he whispered softly, voice thick with emotion and overwhelming bittersweet relief. Eli ran toward him, wearing his grandfather's old farming cap with proud, beaming excitement. "Grandpa!" he exclaimed, hugging Harold tightly with childlike joy. Harold smiled. Tears worn, familiar. Sometimes, standing up for what's right changes everything. even when it seems impossible. The neighborhood healed slowly, rebuilding trust through honesty, fairness, ship choices. Bonnie's downfall became a cautionary tale, whispered among HOAs about unchecked power's inevitable consequences. Harold's courage inspired others nationwide to challenge similar abusive homeowner association practices and tyranny. Justice arrived powerfully, proving resilience and truth ultimately triumph over corrupt authority. In the end, marked a movement reclaiming dignity, fairness, and genuine community.